The office of the President of the United States is one of immense power and profound responsibility. It's a position that stands at the very center of American life, a symbol of the nation's strength and its democratic ideals. Yet, this high office has also been touched by deep and abiding tragedy. Throughout the nation's history, a dark shadow has fallen across the White House on 4 separate, terrible occasions. 4 men, duly elected to lead the country, had their lives cut short not by illness or accident, but by the calculated, violent act of an assassin's hand. These were not just political events, they were moments of national trauma that shook the country to its core. Abraham Lincoln, James A. Garfield, William McKinley, John F. Kennedy. These 4 tragedies occurred across a span of nearly 100 years, from the final days of the Civil War to the heart of the Cold War. An actor enraged by the South's defeat, a disgruntled office seeker consumed by his own perceived importance, an anarchist who rejected all forms of government, a mysterious gunman whose motives are still debated today. Understanding these assassinations is to understand the pivotal moments when the course of American history was suddenly and irrevocably altered. The stories of these fallen presidents are not just about their deaths, they're about the rich lives they led, the work they left unfinished, and the profound and lasting impact their absence had on the country they had sworn to serve and protect. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, a man whose legacy is etched into the very soul of America. Forged in the crucible of national crisis, he rose from a log cabin in Kentucky, a largely self-educated man who became a respected lawyer in Illinois. His sharp wit, profound moral compass and powerful oratory defined his political ascent, carrying him from the state legislature to the White House. He was a man who had known deep personal tragedy, which perhaps gave him the empathy to lead a grieving nation. His election in 1860 was the spark that ignited the Civil War. For 4 brutal years he steered the Union with a steady, often weary hand. The weight of a divided nation rested on his shoulders, a burden that visibly aged him. His primary resolve was to preserve the nation at all costs. But as the war raged on, his purpose evolved, culminating in the Emancipation Proclamation, a monumental step towards ending the institution of slavery. By April 1865, the war was finally over. The feeling in Washington was one of relief and hope for healing and reunification. On the evening of April 14th, a Good Friday, Lincoln and his wife Mary sought a moment of relaxation at Ford's Theater. It was there that John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor and ardent Confederate sympathizer, saw his chance. Believing he was striking a blow for the defeated South, he snuck into the presidential box during the 3rd act and shot Lincoln in the back of the head with a single-shot derringer. The nation was plunged into mourning. Lincoln died the next morning, never to oversee Reconstruction. His death marked the beginning of strange parallels that would echo through history. He was shot on a Friday, in the presence of his wife, and his successor, Andrew Johnson, was a Southern Democrat, a pattern that would eerily repeat itself a century later. 16 years later, in 1881, the nation faced another shocking assassination. James A. Garfield, the 20th president, had been in office for only 4 months. He was a true log cabin to White House story. A brilliant scholar, he rose to become a decorated Major General for the Union in the Civil War before serving 9 terms in the House. He was a reluctant candidate, a compromise choice who never sought the presidency. His brief administration was defined by a fierce battle against the entrenched spoils system, a corrupt practice where government jobs were handed out as political favors. Garfield was determined to replace this with a merit-based civil service. This crusade for reform was noble, but it also made him powerful and bitter enemies. One was Charles Guiteau, a mentally unstable man who believed he deserved a diplomatic post for his perceived help in Garfield's election. When repeatedly rejected, his entitlement curdled into a murderous rage. On July 2, 1881, Garfield was walking through a Washington railroad station, preparing to leave for a summer vacation. Suddenly, Guiteau approached from behind and fired 2 shots, striking the president in the back. Unlike Lincoln's wound, Garfield's was not immediately fatal. For 79 agonizing days, the nation held its breath as he lingered. A dozen different doctors probed for the bullet, often with unsterilized fingers and instruments introducing sepsis. Even inventor Alexander Graham Bell was brought in, attempting to locate the bullet with a primitive metal detector. He ultimately succumbed not to the bullet but to a massive infection on September 19, 1881. Guiteau's heinous act, born of a delusional personal grievance, had a deeply ironic outcome. It created a wave of public revulsion against the very system he sought to exploit. Public outrage galvanized the nation, leading directly to the passage of the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act. This landmark legislation ended the spoils system, creating a professional civil service based on merit, a lasting tribute to the president who died fighting for it. Just as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, another president fell, echoing a tragedy from just 2 decades prior. William McKinley, the 25th president, was a popular leader, a decorated Civil War veteran who had risen through the ranks of Congress to become governor of Ohio. He presided over a period of booming economic prosperity, championing the gold standard. A firm believer in American expansionism, he led the nation to a swift victory in the Spanish-American War, acquiring territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, and positioning the U.S. as an emerging global power. In September 1901, McKinley attended the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. On September 6th, while greeting the public in a receiving line at the Temple of Music, he insisted on minimal security, wanting to connect directly with the people. Hidden in the line was Leon Czolgosz, a disgruntled factory worker and self-proclaimed anarchist who believed presidents were enemies of the working people. Czolgosz, with a pistol concealed in a handkerchief, reached the president and fired 2 shots at point-blank range. One bullet grazed McKinley, but the other lodged deep in his abdomen. Surgeons couldn't locate it. For 8 days the nation held its breath as the president seemed to improve, but then gangrene set in around the wound. On September 14, 1901, McKinley died. Vice President Theodore Roosevelt was sworn in, ushering in a more progressive era. 62 years passed. The world was now unrecognizable, a planet divided by the Cold War, reaching for the stars in the space race and connected for the first time by the flickering glow of television. John F. Kennedy, a decorated World War II hero and scion of a powerful political family, embodied this new generation. He was young, charismatic, and projected a vision of vigor and optimism he called the New Frontier. His presidency stared down nuclear annihilation during the Cuban Missile Crisis and pushed the nation to land a man on the moon. On Friday, November 22, 1963, Kennedy traveled to Dallas to mend fences in the state's Democratic Party. The sun shone as he and his wife Jacqueline rode in an open-top Lincoln limousine, waving to adoring crowds. As the motorcade passed Dealey Plaza, the atmosphere was shattered by rifle fire. Kennedy was struck in the head and neck. He was rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital and pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested later that day. But the story took another shocking turn when 2 days later Oswald himself was murdered on live television by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. This shocking moment fueled decades of conspiracy theories. But beyond them, a series of uncanny historical parallels to Lincoln's assassination emerged. Both presidents were shot on a Friday, with their wives beside them. Both were succeeded by Southern Democrats named Johnson. Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater. Kennedy in a Lincoln limousine made by Ford. Their assassins, John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald, were known by 3 names and born 100 years apart. These eerie coincidences became part of the folklore surrounding Kennedy's death, a profound national trauma, a moment frozen in time, and for many, a loss of innocence from which the nation would never fully recover. In the aftermath of John F. Kennedy's death, a strange and unsettling series of parallels to Abraham Lincoln's assassination began to surface. Passed around in newspapers and magazines, these coincidences quickly wove themselves into a modern American folklore, a way of finding pattern in the unthinkable. The eerie symmetry begins with their political ascensions. Both Lincoln and Kennedy were first elected to Congress in years ending in 1846 and 1946. The parallel continued to the highest office. Both men were then elected president in years ending in 1860 and 1960, each on the cusp of a profound national crisis. In office, both presidents championed the cause of civil rights. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation during the Civil War, while Kennedy laid the groundwork for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Tragically, their lives were cut short in a chillingly similar manner. Both were assassinated on a Friday in the presence of their wives, each suffering a fatal gunshot wound to the head. The coincidences extend to their inner circles. President Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy, who reportedly warned him not to go to the theater that fateful night. A century later, President Kennedy's personal secretary was Evelyn Lincoln. She too reportedly advised him against his trip to Dallas, expressing a bad feeling about the visit. The men who pulled the triggers also fit a strange pattern. Both were Southerners with extremist views, known by their three names, John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald. Each name contains 15 letters. Booth was born in 1839, Oswald in 1939, a precise 100-year gap, and in a final bizarre twist, Booth shot Lincoln in a theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald shot Kennedy from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. In the chaotic aftermath, both slain presidents were succeeded by Southern Democrats named Johnson. Andrew Johnson, who took office after Lincoln, was born in 1808. Exactly 100 years later, in 1908, Lyndon B. Johnson, Kennedy's successor, was born. Both men faced the monumental task of healing a fractured and grieving nation. Even the locations are linked by an uncanny thread. Lincoln was shot in a theater named Ford. Kennedy was shot while riding in a limousine, a Lincoln Continental made by the Ford Motor Company. The name Ford tragically connects the scenes of these two national traumas. These overlapping details, whether meaningful connections or mere random chance, have bound these two presidencies together in a web of historical curiosity that continues to fascinate. While the Lincoln-Kennedy parallels are the most striking, they are part of a larger, tragic pattern of presidential assassinations that also claim the lives of James A. Garfield and William McKinley. The true connection between these four assassinations lies in their profound impact on the nation's trajectory. Each death was a violent interruption of the democratic process, a moment when the will of a single individual overrode the will of millions. More than that, they left behind a legacy of what if, forcing generations to wonder how history might have been different had these four men been allowed to complete their terms. For those interested in exploring the legacies, mysteries, and impact of these presidents, here are some highly recommended books. November 22, '63 by Stephen King. A gripping novel that explores the possibility of changing the past. Case Closed by Gerald Posner, an acclaimed investigative account of the Kennedy assassination. Lincoln by David Herbert Donald, a definitive biography of Abraham Lincoln. Destiny of the Republic by Candace Millard, an in-depth look at the life and assassination of James Garfield. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance by Dorothy M. Johnson, exploring American myth and history. American Brutus by Michael W. Kaufman, an investigative look at John Wilkes Booth and the Lincoln assassination. Reclaiming History by Vincent Bugliosi, a comprehensive analysis of the Kennedy assassination and conspiracy theories. McKinley, Assassination of the President by Scott Miller, a detailed account of McKinley's life and death. These works offer a range of perspectives, from historical analysis to investigative reporting and even respected conspiracy theories. Each provides valuable insight into the enduring mysteries and legacies of these men.